Good evening, all. My name is Christina Jardis, Chair of the Region 5 Stakeholder Advisory Committee. I'd like to call the meeting to order at 5:32 p.m. on January 21st, 2025. And this is our third Region 5 Stakeholder Advisory Committee meeting. And so we'll do the November notes first, right? Do the agenda and then the November?
The agenda, then November.
Okay.
And then December.
Check there. Okay, before we continue, we will need to have a motion to approve the agenda for today's meeting.
You approve it? Second.
Okay, Stephen, second. Okay, vote, all in favor? Aye. Okay, goes everybody? All in favor? All,
Any opposed?
any opposed? None? Okay, agenda has been adopted. Okay, and then we'll need a motion to approve the meeting minutes for, let's see, November 20th, our first meeting. That was the set of notes that we were going to approve via email, but we didn't get enough folks to approve via email. So we're doing it today. Motion to approve. Okay, second. Okay, vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, all opposed or any opposed? None, okay. The meeting notes have been approved. And then we will also look to have a motion to approve the December 18th meeting notes, meeting minutes so that was our last meeting. In motion?
I'll make that approve.
We got first.
I'll second.
Steve on second, okay. We'll move that to a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, any opposed? None, okay. Notes have been approved. And then with that, we can go ahead and start the meeting. I just want to remind folks that we have a hard stop tonight at 7:45 p.m. So if we have any enlightening conversation that we have to maybe table some components of for the next meeting or future meetings, we'll have to do that to make sure that we get out of the library because they close. So we have no other option. And I also, I had sent an email out to everybody as a reminder about homework, so we can come prepared with the briefing, with knowledge of the briefing papers, having read those. And Mark's going to be sending emails highlighting critical information. So if you don't have a chance to look at all 36 pages, you can at least come prepared with those key topics that we need to know and discuss. Okay. I'll go ahead and turn that over to Mark and Sam.
Okay, so here's our agenda for this evening. Again, we always like to start off with showing everybody where we've been, where we're going over the next year, because hopefully by this time next year, we'll actually be putting forth the region plan and a draft zoning map to county council. Then we'll have two experts share some thoughts about affordable housing and market rate housing. Talk about the Odenton Town Center, sort of how that fits into this equation about housing as well. And then we'll do a couple breakout groups where we can talk about what the housing issues are that you're sensing within your communities and within the region, and maybe where you want to encourage housing in the region or where you want to discourage housing. And then again, we'll finish up with public comments, time permitting, as well as next steps. So again, where we are in the process, we're right there in the middle. And if my cursor works here, right, is we're currently working on the vision statement. So far, we have only received 9 votes, and actually only 7. 2 people skipped actually voting on the vision statement. It just provides some feedback. So we do, again, that survey is still open just for SAC members to provide feedback on 3 draft vision statements. So still looking for feedback. If you can do that tonight or tomorrow, that would be appreciated.
Mark, I have a question on that. If
Yep.
you somehow didn't vote because you didn't realize, is there a way to go back and update things?
Let me know. Let's try the link again, and if you're blocked from doing it, then reach out to me. Yeah. So where we are here is we're developing, or we're going through some topical discussions, and that'll go feed into then developing these draft goals, policies, and strategies, right? Because we want to understand what the existing conditions are, the issues are, so that by the time we get to the end of this plan, we're identifying strategies of how to solve those issues or continue some of the good stuff, if you will, okay? And then later in the springtime, we're gonna be working on a planned land use map as well as a zoning map where we actually roll the maps out and we move throughout the community and make some recommendations, whether to upzone, downzone, or change sort of the general zoning of it from residential, commercial, community. So we'll do that again in the spring. But again, just to sort of highlight where we are in the process. Upcoming meetings, in February, we're gonna have a joint meeting with Region 6 because we'll focus on the Maryland 3 corridor, the transportation aspect, as well as economic development. And then in March, school, we'll also talk about some other public facilities, continue on transportation, anything that we didn't hit there at bullet number 4. And then we'll start into our land use and zoning discussion. We'll give you sort of an overview. We talked, I think, last time about development policy areas a little bit. Really get you up to speed then on some of the terminology and characteristics of some of these designations. So a lot of boxes here. I just wanted to put this up because I wanted to provide a little more context here based on our discussion last month about sort of the different iterations of some of the work that you'll be working on. So starting here in the upper left-hand corner, this was sort of, I'm just describing it as community providing feedback. So during last spring, when we kicked off this process and over the summer, we were out in the community doing outreach events, going to festivals, gathering information. We had just a big whiteboard up, maps, people could identify what was doing in certain areas, what people liked, what the issues were, things like that. So all that information then fed into then the next box of developing these draft strategies that you're seeing at the end of these briefing papers. They're just very draft based on some of the information that we've heard from the public, as well as other county departments. And then here in the red box is where we are now. So you all then, based on this previous information, are reviewing these draft strategies. It's just the first cut at this. Just wanting to get your take whether we're on the right track so that we can then shop this out to the public, which is then the next step here, where we, based on the information that you've provided us, we've updated some of those strategies. So we're going to be looking to put those strategies out into a questionnaire for the public to review and provide feedback on in the next few weeks or so. And we'll do that a couple times. So right now we're sort of wrapping up the environment, cultural resources, as well as parks that we discussed last time. We're starting to get into housing, transportation, economic development. That'll be the next set of questionnaires that we put out to the public here shortly. So those questionnaires go out to the public for about a month or so each time. And then when we reconvene in August sometime is when we'll have those draft strategies with public input that we can then share back with you and say, here's how the public felt about some of this. Do you want to tweak any of these strategies based on that feedback? And you'll have that opportunity, like I said, in this middle box, which we anticipate in August or late summer. Then the county departments review that work, better understand if it's feasible, if it's something that could be within their work plan. And again, it's the SAC's feedback as well as the community's feedback that help go into the county department's determination of whether it could be a feasible strategy going forward. Then in the fall of next year this 2025 is when the draft plan and zoning map goes to the planning advisory board. They're a board that really reviews the budget as well as master plans before it goes to county council. And so they get a crack at reviewing these. There's a briefing, there's a public comment period, and they make recommendations on the plan and the zoning map. And then ultimately it goes to county council, and they have the final authority to adopt the plan and the zoning map. At that point, there is also an opportunity for public comment. So you kind of see that, I'm trying to highlight or bolded certain responsible parties within these boxes to identify who's doing what when. And you can see that community is very much involved in this process. You all are very much involved in this process. It's very iterative here where it's constantly being refined based on the feedback that we receive.
And the
Okay.
last box is 2026.
This should be, yeah, January, February of 2026. So to give you some feedback is we're, looking to introduce the Region 1 plan at the February 3rd County Council meeting. So that was the round before us. And so we're looking to keep up that same type of schedule.
Mark, real quick,
Yeah.
can you share your screen for the attendees online?
Oh, yes. Okay, everybody good with sort of this overall flow of how we're working through this process with the different feedback points that we get? Then this consensus continuum, again, just how we're making decisions and how we're sort of moving the ball forward is this is at the back of your procedures manual that you had received earlier when you first signed on. It may also have emojis up at the top. I'm going with these old school play, pause type of icons, but really just sort of indicate that as we're making decisions that you take into consideration, like, is this a full stop? Can't move forward with this decision. We need more information. Or is this, I'm not the expert. I kind of trust the group. Let's see how this plays out. So for example, in round 2, there were situations where the SAC was making certain zoning recommendations early on in the process. They didn't have all the answers. They said, let's sort of soft pedal this for the public to review, get their feedback, and then we'll be able to make some better decisions. So just trying to keep in mind that, there's a lot of in between here, and try to figure out where you are sort of on this decision-making spectrum, whether it's like, yeah, definitely like it, of course, let's move forward. I trust the group. Yeah, let's still move forward. Or, hey, we need more information, more work is needed, or, this really just isn't in line with what the community is saying. Okay. So we're going to be working off of consensus, kind of like just looking around, making sure people are nodding their heads and we can move forward. If it looks like the room is kind of split, some half nodding, some like, ooh, I got some heartburn about this, we'll stop and we can take some votes if necessary. And we'd be looking, if it's a policy decision, at like a 67% vote to move forward with certain items. So again, we'll come back to this, but just wanted to put this out there as we, again, start reviewing some of these draft strategies. Okay, before I move on to housing and the topics for tonight, any other sort of housekeeping or logistics questions?
You will circulate the strategies when you've written them?
Well, so we went over the parks and environmental strategies last month. I circulated those to the group. Stephen, you had provided some feedback on those. So
On the vision.
it was on the vision, but the draft strategies were still also circulated after last month's meeting. And I was looking for feedback by today so that we can then peddle these out to the public. Okay? You all received that email?
I'll go back and look.
Yeah,
Did everyone else?
yeah. So
It's headline strategy.
the document was attached.
Okay.
So we can go over emails if you'd like later, but again, that was all I had mentioned that I'd share those after the meeting and look for feedback within a month's time so that we can keep this ball moving with these draft strategies. Okay, moving on to,
That's the one we read through together last meeting.
yes, right, exactly. And I had made some tweaks based on the conversation. If you remember, I stylized those in italics.
Yes.
And then cleaned it up a little bit more, so, and then circulated that, so. Okay, so housing, let's see if I can hide this any further. Some of the things that we've heard in the community is a variety, there's a need for more housing types. Typically, you look around the community, it might just be multifamily, townhomes, and single-family homes. There's a lot of in-between types of housing that we'll get into here in this presentation. folks are looking for something like that. Making sure housing is affordable. So again, thinking about our first year teachers, our first year firefighters, our service workers, making sure that they have an opportunity to live in the community where they may work and not have to use the roads necessarily to get from Howard County or Carroll County to here for employment. Demographics are changing. So making sure that we have, again, the different types of housing that can suit folks that are growing older and are looking to live within the community where they've always lived, looking at younger populations as well as family. The third bullet here, I think we heard quite a bit when we were doing our outreach, is there is too much development, and then that development leads to more development. So if there's more housing, then there might be more need to, or there might be a need to build more commercial or employment areas to support that residential. I think what we've talked about here is making sure that these communities are providing enough green space or enough public or community amenities for the folks that live within that community. And making sure that there's infrastructure available at the moment to support any new development. And for example, housing, making sure that there are those amenities, making sure that there is capacity on the roads to support the development, rather than that infrastructure maybe being planned afterwards.
Now,
So,
this is what the community's saying, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, it's really just a distilled version of all the comments that we've heard
Okay.
from outreach, from online surveys, and yep. So we'll get into this a little bit more when we do our breakouts, right? This is, again, sort of the big picture items, but when we do our breakouts, want to hear from you all of whether you agree with these, whether there are additional ones that you want to get into. That'll be the purpose of our breakout group discussion. Okay, so with that, I'm going to hand it over to our housing experts. First off, we have Erin Karpowitz, and she'll share a little bit more about affordable housing.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me. This is a kind of a wall of text. I'm not going to read through everything there, but I like to start off with a slide because a lot of times people ask me, what's affordable housing? And what's the difference between affordable and workforce housing? So I'm going to just touch on that a little bit. In the industry, usually affordable housing is considered housing where households do not have to pay more than 30% of their income on housing related costs. So that's considered affordable. And you can have affordable at all different kinds of income ranges. People say, well, wait, is affordable housing just for people who are really low income? Well, no, you can be middle income and you still need affordable housing. You can only pay a certain amount of your rent. Of course, as you get higher and higher in income, you can afford to pay more, a greater percentage of your income for housing. But typically in our industry, we look at, are you paying around 30% or maybe a little bit more for your housing costs? And there are different ways that we can, get involved in the market to create affordable housing opportunities for certain income ranges. My organization, Arundel Community Development Services, we're the county's housing and community development agency. So we're a lot of times concerned about people who are at the lower end of the income range. And so we're trying to go ahead and create opportunities that aren't already created in the market. So we're providing low interest loans to subsidize the creation of units, and then in exchange, those developers are creating income restricted units. So they have to set the rents at a certain price so that they're affordable to people at that income range. There are other policies on the books in the county that create workforce housing opportunities that sometimes that's a little bit slightly higher income range. So when we're making our loans for affordable rental, it's usually people earning 60% of area median income and below. But there are some policies on the books that are helping people up to 100% of area median income. And I'll talk about that in a little bit. Mostly, I don't like that distinction between affordable and workforce. I think workforce is a politically palatable term that's been used at various times. But what it insinuates is that the people who are in affordable units or the more deeply subsidized aren't working, and that's just not true. and I'll get to a slide that kind of talks about those different income limits in a second. But the last point I want to make on the slide is that healthy and sustainable communities have a mix of housing that's affordable to a variety of income ranges. So it's good to see that some of the stakeholders that you all have outreach to talked about different types of housing, different housing types. That's important because when you're talking about affordable and lowering the cost of housing, you need to be able to be creative and create smaller housing units and have a mix of that. And you really need a mix of housing that's affordable to different types of people to have a healthy community. One of the things that I noted in the governor's office and Maryland Department of Housing and Community Development have a bill that's circulating now, and they did a jobs housing report. And they noted that there were 40,000 young people, ages 17 to 34, who left the state in 2022. That out-migration has affected our economy and affected the ability to connect workers with available jobs. It's had an impact on the amount of revenue, tax revenue that the state is taking in. And now they have a $3 billion deficit. So our economy needs housing. The Maryland Association of Realtors did a survey and they found that younger renters are considering leaving the state because of housing costs. So as a mom of a 17-year-old who doesn't want to talk to me right now, I'm like, well, maybe when she gets out of college, she'll talk to me, but she might not even be in the state because she may not be able to afford a house here. So just if you could go to the next slide, Mark, this gives you an idea when we're talking about that lower income range, who I'm talking about. Again, it could be older adults who have fixed incomes or people with disabilities who are not working, but a lot of it's our working people. It's our people who are providing personal care services. Maybe it's our maintenance specialists, our construction workers, our educational workers, like our paraprofessionals, people who are providing social services, case management, some of my staff at my agency who are providing important health and human service supports for our residents. You can see someone who's earning 60% of area median income, and again, that's kind of who my agency is serving when we make affordable housing loans. They can afford about $1,600 a month, and they're making $66,000 a year, and that's for, I think, a household size of 3. So that's what they can afford, and it's really hard to find those units. The new units that have come online recently, the average rent for those units was about $2,400 a month. And we're seeing that, that's probably really old data, we're seeing that really go up. You want to go to the next slide? Again, for this lower income group, about 60% of area median income. In 2019, we did a study and we were about 10,000 units short for that group. We did the same study again at the end of 2022, and we were about, what does that say? Does that say 13,000? I'm sorry, I can't read my own slide. I think it's, I have a copy here, my eyes are bad. I'm sorry, it's 12,456, so about 12,500 units short. So you can see we're losing affordable housing, so preservation of our existing units is really important. Also of note, I think, permits, you can see that we used to have about, let's see, I'm sorry. Oh, no, sorry, that's the next slide. It's a different slide, if you want to keep going. Sorry. This is renter cost burden. So again, I said that affordable units are units where you're not paying more than 30% of your income. Well, the lower income you are, the more cost burdened you are. When you're looking at households in the county that have, are at about 30% of area median income, 83% of those households are cost burdened. I think for all renters in Anne Arundel County, the current number is 43% of all renters are cost burdened in Anne Arundel County. It's a rental. That's a rental. So that's just renters. And that's new data, and I'm gonna get you the source for that. So I didn't have it from my consultant, but it's if you're renting, you're gonna probably be on the lower income on average versus homeowners, and it's a high cost burden. you wanna go to the next one, if you're looking at people who are looking to buy a house, it's very expensive in Anne Arundel County. We're second only to, Howard County in the Baltimore metropolitan region. The median sale price in 2024 was $517,000, in Anne Arundel County. So it's very expensive. You would need to have a median income of about $164,000 in Anne Arundel County to afford the median sales price. And that's about 168% of area median income in this area. Okay, next slide. This is what I was what I thought was on the other one. So if you look at 2014 through 2019, we averaged 2,400 new residential building permits per year. And in 2020 to 2023, it was just 1,600. So production of units, the supply has gone down, and it's challenging to find supply. So my agency is providing loans to be able to subsidize the creation of income restricted units. But one thing I hope this group gets out of this is just overall market rate production is down because we're not producing as much as we used to, but the demand and the jobs and the number of people in this area has increased. One interesting fact I got from my colleagues at Economic Development is that of those people working in Anne Arundel County, 62% live outside of the county. And of those people living in Anne Arundel County, of those workers living in the county, 63% work outside the county. So it has obviously implications for the environment and the sustainability of the jurisdiction. If you go, just a couple ideas, again, we talked about.
You work with the Maryland mortgage programs too, to help guide people to that. I'm a real estate agent, so I do this all day long.
Yes,
And help
and,
people get in sometimes.
yeah, so my agency, we work very closely with Maryland Department of Housing and Community Development and their Maryland mortgage program. We also have a down payment closing cost assistance program. We're using some of the housing trust fund dollars that the county provides to help people give up to $50,000 in down payment and closing costs, which is, you think, wow, that's great. Like, you know, we have over 400 active people in our programs, but it's very hard for them to then use that money to go and find a house because they can't find houses that still meet their affordability.
So you showed about an 800 housing per year housing drop in the last 20 to 2023. A lot of that's driven by the cost of materials has gone up during COVID.
Mhm.
You know, went from 700%, now it's down to like 300% where it used to be. So what do you think is causing that? You talked about it, but you didn't say what's the cause. I mean, there's a lot of restrictions by the county to get permits, so I do this all the time, and there's lots of times that the county will refuse your permit, so the county's part of the problem. Part of it is the building materials, part of it is lack of land, you know, so what do you guys think the reason is it dropped so much?
If you can wait,
Okay.
20 minutes.
I gave you a good lead.
Yeah, thank you for that.
My market rate colleague here is gonna get into that, but I would just say, you know, one big driver is the lack of land that's zoned to create these units, and that's one thing I would ask this group to think about when you are making recommendations as part of this process. Just some ideas, this is Penthouse Creek in Galesville. This is actually this is something I think our colleagues at Planning and Zoning have used as a model for that missing middle typology, where they want to demonstrate small cottage type developments around the courtyard. And I think in order to develop this in today's world under our current zoning code and land use policies, there would need to be some changes made to the code. This was a historic oyster shucker worker housing that my company renovated over 25 years ago, and we maintain it as affordable rental housing in South County, and it's beautiful. So it's a great example of some different housing types. If you look at the next one, here are just some, I don't know if I stole this from you.
Sure
Sorry.
did.
I? Sorry. Sorry, I didn't look through. So anyway, I stole this from Karen with some market rate examples. I'll let her talk about those. if you go to the next one, sorry, this was from my GAN presentation last week. And this is actually rental housing development. These are properties that my organization with county, loan funds that the county executive and county council has supported through the Housing Trust Fund, and prior to that, some county general funds, some of our federal funds that we get. We make these loans to both nonprofit and for-profit affordable housing developers. Beautiful products, like, I think there's this image of public house, this isn't public housing, but people, when they think of affordable housing, they think public housing. Public housing has come a long way too. They have some really beautiful products. It's well-managed, well-maintained with, experienced property managers who are taking care of it. The one on the top to the left, that's actually rental housing, even though they're single family detached. It's a rent-to-own community, in the Old Mill area. The one below that is Burger Square, which is in, Odenton. And the other one is in the city of Annapolis. So beautiful products, and it really an important source of affordable units. Again, rents for a 2-bedroom around, $1,500, $1,600. It's not cheap, but it is affordable compared to what's being out there. Next slide. This is an example of one of my company's small affordable housing developments. We do look for county surplus land. There's not a lot out there that's developable, but when an opportunity arises, we take it. And then we're able to subsidize the creation of these units and sell them. These were mostly all homeownership units. I think we have one still in our rental portfolio. And they were sold to households at about 120% to 100% of area median income at affordable prices. Again, I talked about the Housing Trust Fund. I'm really excited. We were able to invest over $13 million last fiscal year in affordable rental deals, either creating new units or preserving. Down the street at Wall Chapel, one of the developments there is affordable housing for older adults, and it's called Villages at Little Patuxent. So I'm really excited we were able to support that, and we've got several other projects that are in the pipeline. A lot of these are big developments with very experienced rental housing developers. But the property up top is an example of a unit that we acquired in Brooklyn Park. There are older units there. My company has actually served as a developer there, where we acquire the properties, renovate them, and then rent them out for affordable prices. And that's an area where we can acquire things in an affordable way. It's hard to find things at that price point in a lot of other communities. So doing new development and multifamily development is kind of the way to go in a lot of communities. And then finally, just one thing I want to highlight, again, talking about a range of housing types and price points for different people. I'm helping create new units at 60% for people earning 60% AMI, but the county council and the county executive's office thought, well, we also need something for kind of that middle income. And so recently in October, thanks to the leadership of several council members and county agencies that got together in a work group, Karen was in the work group, Jim was in the work group. So they got together and we came together and figured out this, had the Housing Attainability Act. And basically that's an inclusionary housing bill that requires developers to create a certain percentage of units that are affordable to households, for renters that are earning 75% of area median income, and for homeowners who are earning 100% of area median income. And I'm sorry, I spit out these percentages, and I wanted to give you a real example of what someone earning 75% of AMI, but I lost it on my email, so I'll get back to you on that. But I think it was around $110,000 for a household size of 3. I didn't want to take up a lot of time going through the details of this, but did you want to hold questions until Karen's finished, or do you want me to take questions now?
Let's hold questions, because I think some might blend together depending upon the presentation, so.
Okay, great. Well, thanks for the opportunity to chat with you.
Good evening, and thanks for having me. My name is Karen McDuncan. I'm a regional partner with Elm Street Development. I've been developing in the county for 36 years. My first project was actually Crofton Chase in 1989, which is just across the street. I drove through, it's still holding up okay.
I live there.
I was 27 at the time, so. That's the truth. So I'm here tonight to talk about market rate housing. I'm gonna come at it from a supply perspective and a demand perspective. And supply would be what's getting built and why and how much, and then we'll get into demand. As you all are probably aware from driving around, the new home production market is dominated by large production builders. And why that is primarily what we were talking about before. We're severely land constrained, supply constrained on the lot and land side of things here. And when that happens, it means that in order to deliver homes that the area can afford, that you have to build the most efficient unit you possibly can. And production builders build that, the lowest cost unit. And it's 20 by 40 foot townhomes, it's rectangular single families. And, you know, the housing's great, but it just hasn't changed much over the years. And that's primarily why, is because of that land supply constraint. I want to go to the next. What's happening and what we're seeing recently, and I'm sure you're seeing this in the market, most of what's getting built are townhomes. That's a big change over the last 15 years. Jim, you presented something today that said 90% of what was approved last year were townhomes. We're seeing very few condominiums getting approved, being built. That's not because there isn't demand necessarily. It's a very risky proposition to build condominiums from a lawsuit standpoint. So that's why we're not seeing too many of those.
And those are mostly 55 and older.
Most of what you see, yeah, that's, but, you know, personally, I think there's a market for, if we were able to take that risk for market rate condos. And so as a result, as I said, little variation of product type over the last 20 years. It's a bit, like I said, efficient to build. The big builders have it down to a T, low cost, they know what every nail costs. And it's very, very hard to justify changing the design when our land costs are so high.
And Two Rivers is a good example, right? Because those things are all cranked out like 1 a week.
And I'm not passing judgment on quality of it, I'm just trying to give you sort of a why that happened, why that does happen. My last statement down there, it has changed a bit. So we built the townhomes that you've seen, single families that you've seen over the years because they fit easily within existing zoning ordinances and subdivision regulations. There's been some legislation over the last year, mostly in the big, Jim, jump in here. And the MPU bill.
And Aaron mentioned there's some flexibility in that bill, and incentive part of that was introducing new and different product types.
And so I think going forward, you know, once new projects get into the queue and it takes 3 to 4 years to get through the process, you will start to see some of those different housing types. And that's a great change. Next slide. Yeah, I'm sorry.
What created that incentive for different product types that are in the market?
Well, it goes to what Aaron was saying, was we need the ability to do smaller homes on smaller lots. And the subdivision regulations and zoning ordinances often dictated larger lots. And again, because the price of land is so high, you couldn't justify building that smaller home on that larger lot.
So what changed the zoning?
It was the NPDU, the affordable housing legislation that Aaron talked about. It was part and parcel of that. Again, I think it's gonna be a great change. It'll allow us to do market housing as well as affordable housing.
What does market housing mean?
That means that whatever the market will pay. So it's not restricted. If you go to buy a house in a new home community, you would look at a market rate. As opposed to what Aaron was talking about, which is the price would be capped at a certain number based on what your income is.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't really get into the details of the bill, but one of the things, in order to require developers to make a certain percentage of their units capped and not be market rate, would be the NPDU units. One of the, incentives, I guess, on the other side to kind of make them be able to financially be able to create these developments was to allow for different housing types, like a duplex or a triplex or a quadplex.
And
Whereas those
yeah, we'll show
otherwise-
examples of that on the next, no, that's all right,
Sorry.
that's all right. So top two pictures, what you have been seeing for a long time, same basic box below. We're seeing skins change a little bit, the elevations change a little more modern, but same basic box. I think what the market would like to see on the next slide, and what I think we'll be able to deliver more of, based on the new legislation. Some of the cottages that you're seeing, the duplexes in the lower right, and possibly even the lower left, and definitely the upper right. And, the lower right and the upper left, are units that production builders actually build in other markets. And so it's not gonna be a stretch to get them to build them here.
What are the other markets?
Oh, like Seattle, Washington, Denver, Colorado.
Oh, you just mean other locations?
Yeah,
Gotcha.
yeah.
Yeah.
What's the barrier for those different types of structures, just the zoning ordinances?
Yeah, and subdivision regulations, setbacks, lot widths, lot sizes.
Okay, so you guys are looking to change, because one of the things we did at the beginning, is we each put down two things we cared about. One of mine was affordable housing, that's a dairy farm. And so a lot of the problems that we have with the ordinances is RA zoning and R1 zoning. They have different minimum lot sizes, which takes RA land and makes it so you can only build one house on 5 or 20 acres versus putting 20 houses on that 5 or 20 acres. And how do we modify those things so we can make better use of the land that the county has for more housing, which makes it more affordable? Because if I'm a builder, I have a 5-acre lot and it can't be subdivided, but I can get it subdivided and put 10 houses on there, suddenly I can make them more affordable, because I put one house on 5 acres, it's gonna cost $2 million, right? If I put 10 houses on 5 acres, I can sell them each for 500,000.
That's why you're here, is to look at those things.
Yeah, so we get to look at those ordinances and change them right on the spot, right?
Good luck with that. Good luck with that.
To be optimistic.
Yeah.
Next slide, Mark. You get a chance. To play on what you said earlier, Charles, what we've seen, we saw, construction costs go way up during COVID. They flattened out a bit, just marginal increases since then. Average new home price was up during COVID. It continues to go up. And that's supply demand at work. There just aren't that many units on the market for the demand. This is a pretty big one. The number of new home communities is down by, I think it's over 80% now. We used to track in Anne Arundel County between 30 and 35 new home communities. We're under 10 at this point. And that just goes to that supply demand imbalance.
And this lack of land, right?
Yeah, it's lack of land, for a long time, a lot of areas were shut down because of
Oh, yeah.
schools. And it takes, like I said before, it takes 3 to 4 years to get through the process. And so there's still that lag time, that we're seeing. But even, with more of the school, districts open, there just isn't the available land. And it tracks in the building permits are at the lowest level. If you go to the next slide, I think that shows it the best. This is since I started, how it's trended down, during the Great Recession, took a huge dip.
Yeah.
But we're back down to those levels, and I think 2024, we might be 100 units above 2023. But it's tracking right at that same 1,000 permits, 1,100 permits a year. And you'll see how the green is multifamily, that's apartments, and the blue is single family, which includes both detached and attached units. And we don't see that number changing based on what's in the pipeline right now and what the other regions are proposing to upzone and what land is available. So that's gonna be, we think, pretty much steady state.
Upzone is where you take something that's RA and make it R1, so you can put
Exactly.
more housing on it.
Yeah, exactly.
Haven't heard.
Yeah, next one. Thank you. I wanted to take you guys through a cost analysis. So this is for a 16 by 40 foot townhome, which is about a 1,650 square foot unit. It's one car garage, should be affordable to a new home buyer, somebody just entering the market. And, from 19 to 22 to 24, let's start at the top. These are all the components that go into that sales price at the bottom. And lot cost, top line, that's land plus development costs. You'll see how much it has gone up over time, and today, that's actually last March number, it's gone up since then. Let's look at the last two columns. The far right column is the national average for a particular line item, what percent of the total it is. And so this just underscores the point I was making before, that national average, about 17% of the total cost, the total sales price, is in the land. Here, it's over 30% and probably higher today than when I did this slide originally. Second line item, permit impact connection fees. Same story, it's gone up over the years. In fact, it's gone up since the slide too, by about 10,000. And again, we're double the national average for permit and connection fees. Construction costs have gone up, but again, stabilized since COVID. And because of how much land makes up of the total price, construction cost, makes sense that it's lower than the national average. And then it just goes builder soft costs, that's administrative, G&A, carry, and then builder profit, ending up at the sales price. That sales price of 508 to 90, let's go to the next slide.
Excuse me.
Yes. You wanna go back?
Profit, what's been the trend on profit?
During the Great Recession, it was probably negative 20%, but, on average, it's a pretty low margin business. I would say during COVID, it probably spiked to 13%, of the sales price, but it generally runs 8 to 10% for a builder.
So is the trend the same, is it flat, is it the same, or is the trend change?
Yeah, it's, on average, it runs about 9%. And there's no real trend to it. It's economy dependent.
Okay.
Yes.
What's an impact fee that's in the second, group of costs?
Impact fees are for, what builders pay for road impacts, school impacts.
And they go to the county or the
They
state?
go to the county,
Thank you.
yes.
Excuse me, and what about the water lines? Which does that come into?
That's part of lot costs, that's part of development costs. So it's land plus what it costs to put in sewer, water, roads, storm drain.
Okay. Thank you.
But that's the actual water line. The connection fees are in the permit and connection fee line.
Okay, I was asking because I was wondering why, because I bought a new home this time around and I have front foot fees. And those carry on for like 20 some odd years. I'm like, well, if I paid for this in the cost, it seems like that's another back end cost that I'm getting. And I know you're not here to answer that, but it's just something that I wanted to be curious about.
It's the builder's retirement fund, I call it.
Yeah.
Usually 30 years.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
And then I wanted to take a look at how affordable this entry-level townhome is and how it's changed over time and how it is incredibly interest rate sensitive. This is about what you had on your slide. In 2024, that $508,000 home, now the interest rates, I think it's down 7.25 today, but it's been fluctuating. You know, when you add up all the monthly costs, your monthly burden is over $4,000. And to not be cost burdened, you would have to make $163,000 a year. And the median household income for a family of 4 in Anne Arundel County is $121,000 to $123,000. That unit is now unaffordable for someone making the median household income. But go back to 2019 and even 2022. 2022 costs have gone way up, but interest rates were still 5.5. That unit was affordable to somebody making median household income. You know, I don't have a crystal ball. I can't tell you where mortgage rates are gonna go, but it's something to keep in mind that severely impacts affordability. Housing demand characteristics and trends. We've seen household size decreasing, so folks are fine with smaller units. There still is a demand for single family detached, but folks, especially folks in this area, like the low maintenance lifestyle of a townhome. Seem to. Fewer children. In fact, I just saw a statistic where, we have 500 fewer kids in the school system in 23 than we did in 22. And the biggest drop was in the elementary school. So the pipeline is less.
Does that factor in private schools? Or is it just public?
Just
schools?
public schools. Yeah. No surprise, I think ethnic diversity, great for the community. And a big demand for the age restricted buyer, 55 plus. What we see people asking for, liking, buying, and it's what we try and do. Walkable communities near shopping or restaurants, lots of amenities. A lot of the older communities, especially around here, Crofton Chase, for example, back in the day, the county would rather have open space for rec as opposed to amenities. And, you know, I think today people would rather have the amenities. So I'll give kudos to planning and zoning staff. They will work with us to provide the pools and the trails and all the other amenities folks like, as opposed to just requiring open space for rec area. And we think it's resulted in better communities. It's high interest in different product types. We already talked about that. Hopefully we can start delivering on that in the next 3 to 4 years. And, you know, the fact remains that just west of here is the economic engine of the state of Maryland. And that I don't see that changing at NSA, Fort Meade and everything around that. And so people will continue to, employment will continue to increase there, and that's what drives new home demand, or home demand period. Next slide. you know, this is the, I don't know, fourth or fifth time I've given this presentation to regional planning groups, and it's a balancing act, right? We want affordable housing, but it's tough to say, let's increase the supply when we're not comfortable that we can do that in an environmentally sustainable way. You know, nobody wants that new home community next to them. But the numbers are what they are, and permits are down, prices are up, and, in working with Aaron's group and all of their efforts on affordable housing, it also does come down to the supply and demand curve being at the right place for affordability, and we're not there. So, you know, what can be done about it? Next slide, Mark. I think what you guys will be looking at, you know, designating town centers to absorb some of the growth, some of the density. You know, updating the zoning and subdivision regulations, rezoning. And the two check marks at the bottom were something that I talked about last year as what we needed. But the county has acted on that. And that is the missing middle that Mark will address in just a second. And then, updating, the regulations so we can provide some additional housing units. And that's all I got.
And those bills are gonna get through this time, or they've already been?
They've already been through.
They've been through it.
I made a note, again, is typically follow up in an email, I'll provide a link to that bill, and they provided a fact sheet. Sam, in the meantime, has also, grabbed some screenshots and put those up, and we can look at those if we have a couple more minutes here, of the Bill 7224 fact sheet that was created, so. Yeah. So any questions then for Aaron and Karen?
Aaron, who do you work for?
Arundel Community Development Services, sorry, I should have
Okay.
said that more.
You may have said it, I missed it.
Yeah, it's ACDS is the county's nonprofit housing, we're kind of a quasi-governmental agency.
Right.
We contract with the county to provide a lot of their housing and community development services.
Okay, thank you.
We provide, as I was mentioning, we have the down payment and closing cost assistance, but we also provide free first-time home buyer counseling. So if you know of anybody, we take people regardless of their income, and counsel them through the home buying process, help them get their credit in good shape so they can obtain a loan. We provide some other direct programming, as well as we administer a variety of grants and funding sources on behalf of the county.
How about that? So who is it? Can you repeat the name, who you work for, and then can we get a copy of
Sure.
the slide deck?
Yeah. Arundel Community Development
Okay,
Services, or ACDS.
okay, thank you.
It's spelled out on the agenda too.
Okay.
If you ever need to reference where Karen.
We've got the website
as well.
up there as well.
ACDSinc.org.
I have a question about,
No, Karen is on the agenda, but you are not.
Yeah, we weren't sure who was.
Yeah,
coming,
there's,
but we have published the.
Arundel Community Development Services is noted, and then Karen's noted, and so Mark's point, then he wrote on there.
But when we get to next steps is when you can jot down some additional information.
I had a question about, and it's not, I guess it's not necessarily, it's easier to do in Annapolis than here, is utilizing existing building stock and like
Yeah. And like I was
you
saying,
would do with like a warehouse moving to lots, right? Like, we don't necessarily have that in our region, but are there areas where existing building stock can be utilized to renovate, or is it predominantly new that's being targeted?
I mean, like I said, the example I gave of the Brooklyn Park townhomes,
Yes,
those are relatively affordable for our county, for us to acquire and renovate those. But in terms of commercial or warehouse space, you know, when I've talked to economic development, we don't have a low inventory or a high vacancy rate for those, because that type of space is so in demand, and especially because of Fort Meade and the requirement to be on site. You know, while a lot of regions, I think, have, you know, gone down in their office utilization, I don't think it's been quite the same here in Anne Arundel County. And then I think also there, you know, people think that's a great idea to convert, but sometimes that can be extremely expensive because, you know, the window configurations and.
Oh, yeah, no, totally. I'm more so, that might not be a good example, but like utilizing any existing building stock in
Redevelopment.
general
Yeah,
too, because I'm thinking sustainability, right? Embodied carbon, things like that. There's advantages.
Yeah,
To that.
no, and I think that there's a desire to do that, and there's I don't know if you, I'm not an expert on the redevelopment bill, I don't know.
It was just introduced, yeah, so it is more taking an empty big box store, scraping it, and then rebuilding on top of that. There's a redevelopment bill that's been introduced, and there are limited opportunities for that. You know, it probably will pass, we'll see what comes of that, but that's more likely than, we just don't have that.
You know,
cool
it's
ware-
easier to do
I mean,
in
wouldn't it be
urban
so,
areas,
if
but-
we had that cool warehouse stock where there could be a brewery and.
Well, I'm just
and
thinking,
lots and-
like, what they started to do in, like, Camden, New Jersey, for
Yeah.
example, with utilizing existing row houses and whatnot, but like, we don't, like I was noting, we don't really have that, but I was just
Right.
wondering if there's
Yeah.
any other.
There's just not that much, that many vacant buildings.
The old hospital, could renovate that, build a lot of houses there.
Yeah,
Probably, cost ineffective, but, sorry.
I don't know if this is tracked or even how you would track it, but, I was just wondering about demand for multi-generational housing. Just anecdotally, like, I know a lot of people have parents who are aging, who want to live with.
You know, there are some production builders that are building that.
Okay.
Lennar, for example, has a product where we've got, an apartment, if you, a small apartment with another entrance. And in their single family homes, yeah.
And they're doing really well with that. They're selling out all over.
Mm-hmm.
Are there barriers to doing more of that in like existing properties? You know, I've heard of people that wanted to build an apartment for over their garage and were not able to get the permits to do it.
well, so the cool thing is the county did pass the accessory dwelling unit legislation about a year and a half ago, but maybe is it 2 years ago?
Yeah, about
Maybe
2 years.
2023.
Yeah, so, almost 2 years ago. And so, you know, one thing that we're looking at is how well are people utilizing that ability to build those accessory dwelling units? And are, you know, what, you know, I think that there was a little bit of a lag the first year, and more people have utilized it last year, so we need to look at that, and maybe there needs to be some work to kind of, you know, maybe market that opportunity better, and what is the process, so the people are more informed and aware of what that process is. So I would welcome ideas on that, to share with our colleagues at planning and zoning, and how we might utilize that more as a source of affordable rental.
Especially because it's mostly gonna be individuals, and it
You gotta
can be
start
a
with the health
Byzantine
department.
process to get through if it's handled like it's supposed to.
The biggest holdup is the health department. They won't give you the permit because there's so much well and septic in Anne Arundel County. There's not that much public water and sewage in a lot of the areas that would be great for ADUs. It would require a 10,000 square foot sewage, you know, for your septic system. Well, most people have a tiny little third of an acre lot, and they want to put an ADU on it, but they don't have 10,000 square feet. And I was gonna challenge it for a client, but then they said, well, you gotta go up to a judge, and it was, you know, they basically said it's never gonna happen. So until they start being more, and again, maybe this is something we can change, but they have to be more open-minded to the septic requirements for an 800 square foot ADU compared to a home, because they're requiring the same septic field size, which again, no one's gonna have on a small lot that could potentially, you know, add an ADU and then add you know, an apartment or something, right? It's another rental for the county, so. Right now, it's the health department that's holding like 99% of these things up. So talk to Brian Shue, We talked to Charlie, because I'm the one who raised us thinking about it, and he basically said, well, you gotta go in front of the judge and it'll never happen. And I was like, well, I'm not gonna spend, my client's money on something that they've already told me not gonna happen. So that's your hold of the health department.
In the Bay Area in San Francisco, ADUs have, I used to live in a county that was considered the suburbs of San Francisco. An hour and a half out of. But, ADUs were the answer there for low housing stock and affordable housing stock, so.
It's a great thing, and I'm so glad the
It's-
county passed it.
It's a blessing and a curse somewhat.
Yeah,
It's hard to, and I'm sure you guys know plenty of this. It's hard to manage it well, and the good thing is there's a lot of tests, you're probably gonna talk about it in a little bit, but there's a lot of like test cases on the West Coast, the things that have worked, things that have not worked. I don't know if they'd be applicable out here, but.
Any other questions so far on affordable housing, workforce housing, and market rate housing? I'm just going to dive into missing middle housing real quick. I think this has sort of been sprinkled throughout the conversation so far this evening. But again, what's been typically built are these high rises or mid-rise apartment buildings, detached single family, maybe some townhomes, but there are a variety of other housing types that we just aren't seeing, and that's what we're considering missing middle housing. So again, in case that term comes up here during our discussions, just want to get you a little more familiar with that and what some of these look like. So again, the courtyard building, I think Aaron, this was.
We all shared each
Yeah,
other's pictures.
exactly. Cottage courtyard, right, where it's just, smaller buildings, smaller lots, or, just different configurations. Fourplex, the one on the left is sort of from the Two Rivers community, where you've got them attached, and then on the right-hand side where you might see just, an older subdivision, and there's been this conversion from a single-family house into a duplex or a quadplex. I was just looking on Street View the other day for something up in the Region 1 area, up in the Ferndale area, and it's a quadplex, I think, but you wouldn't know it driving by except for the 4 mailboxes out front. So in certain situations, these can blend in to the community very easily, and you wouldn't know it, and it provides those extra housing opportunities at potentially a more affordable level for individuals. So again, you might have a situation with smaller apartments, again, whether these can blend into the community. We can talk about that during our breakouts. And then these were the accessory dwelling units that Nita had brought up, whether it's a detached garage and it's an over the garage type of unit, or it's just some type of like, sort of building out towards the back of the property. So all opportunities, again, sort of looking outside of your single family home, townhome, or multifamily. So, on the left-hand side here is what you could see is an older subdivision, and on the right is sort of blending in, maybe disregard the blue here, which might be a little too ambitious. But focusing here on the yellow is if there is that opportunity, again, to sort of sneak in those few extra units at potentially different price points and be able to house individuals or families, that would have been, what was the statistic? 62% living outside the county, but still working within the county. And again, thinking about the impacts, I think Aaron, you were touching on it, road capacity, the environmental factors. So something to consider and something we'll talk about in the breakout, whether this is again, illustration, just looking at the yellow, whether that's something palatable within the Region 5 area, and maybe what communities. Okay. So I wanted to hang off of Karen's first point on her last slide, was sort of focusing development potentially to the town centers. And within Region 5, we do have the Odenton Town Center. It is a large area. Some folks may think of it as just the area just around the train station and that mixed use community where you have commercial on the first floor and residential up top. But it really is everything from, just outside of Fort Meade gates, south of 32 and over to the Sappington Station Circle. And again, this is one of the 3 town centers within the county. It has a train station where you can get to Baltimore, you can get to DC, and maybe individuals living within this community, within the Odenton Town Center, maybe desiring a different type of lifestyle where you don't have 2 cars or 3 cars, that maybe you just have 1 car, maybe you don't have a car because the train can get you where you need to go, or the robust public or the bus network gets you where you need to go as well. And I think Karen had mentioned it is Fort Meade, right next door, state's largest employer. So whether you're living sort of within this area, there is a back pedestrian gate that gets you into Fort Meade, or taking a bus. Again, sort of identifying that this is one of the areas where the county does want to focus growth and development based on its public transportation options, as well as the employment centers in close proximity. So a little bit about the Odenton Town Center. It is governed by most recently the 2024 master plan. It's sort of very similar to what we're doing here, where the plan itself sets out some broad goals and policies of how development should be occurring. And then the code itself identifies what you can build, where you can build it, and to what intensity. During that Odenton Town Center process that we kicked off a few years ago, again, here are the things that we had heard. People didn't feel like there was a sense of place. Some people even said if you spell Odenton backwards, roughly it says nothing to do. So people wanted to ensure that there was a sense of place, as this was, don't spread that around. Not my words, their words, okay? Making sure that there are those community amenities. So right now, I'll get into a slide that talks about how much investment is being pumped into the Odenton Town Center. Making sure that there are retail options. Right now, with Arundel Mills to the north and Wall Chapel here, you know, it's sort of pulled the gravity away from the Odenton Town Center. And so we're trying to breathe some new life into some retail and restaurant opportunities within the Odenton Town Center. One piece of the puzzle is making sure that people can get around safely and effectively. So making sure that we have all that connectivity, realizing that, you know, single occupancy vehicles dominates a lot of the traffic. So again, if we can connect people from their housing to where they need to go without getting in the car, that would be a win. And then again, opportunities, seeing that we do have the train station, that there are a lot of incentives and investment being pumped into the town center, as well as transportation options. So here, whether you want to use this as sort of a cheat sheet for when we do get into visioning, but this was the vision that they had, they being the Odenton Town Center Advisory Committee, that we have to help advise on the master planning process. This was their vision for that area. So again, hitting upon a lot of things that we've been talking about here. While we do encourage a lot of development within the Odenton Town Center, ensuring that we do protect those environmental resources. And again, making sure that there are those community amenities for folks. I think I've touched on these and want to keep moving here. So again, really hitting home the point that while we talk about affordable housing, workforce housing, and the need for housing, maybe there are these opportunities, and missing middle housing, maybe there are opportunities outside of the Odenton Town Center in the various other communities within Region 5, but keeping in mind that we do anticipate a lot of growth happening within the Odenton Town Center. And it won't be your single family homes, it will be potentially townhomes and something denser than that, multifamily or condos, or even some of the other types of missing middle housing that we talked about. But again, avoiding the single family homes because it just eats up too much land then within this town center area. So again, to sort of help foster and facilitate some of this growth, there are a lot of county projects as well as partner projects occurring within the town center. One being that, MDOT, the Maryland Department of Transportation, they're looking to redevelop the west parking lot, which is, by the Ruth's Chris. Right now, it's currently surface parking lot, and it's not being used to its highest and best use. So they're putting out a request for proposals, to find a developer to build something sort of illustrated there on that picture on the screen. Something denser. There will be a parking garage on the south end of the site. Again, just to sort of best use that land as possible. The county is actively working on the parking garage, like I had mentioned. It's going to be about 1,000 parking spaces. The first phase of the community park, which will occur sort of across from the library, but within the library's entrance. And the first phase will include a walking trail, as well as like, I think, a bocce court and a tot lot, with future phases being considered for like an amphitheater and dog parks. Really try to give this area that sense of place. And then the county has also dedicated funds for improving the transportation network, mainly on the north side of Maryland 175, looking at the streetscape there. Right now, there isn't a good connected sidewalk network. And so the county, realizing that, again, walkability, bikeability is a key component of town centers, investing to build those components of the streetscape and making sure that there's stormwater.
Where's Ruth Chris on there? Just
Bruce Chris is right here.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So this is that surface parking lot. The parking garage will be on the south side,
I
and
just
then,
don't remember all the trees across the street from that, because that's where goes up to that new subdivision.
Is that
That's the cemetery.
Am I backwards? Okay.
yeah, the cemetery is here.
Oh, there we go, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, the town center boulevard goes north. Yeah, so we're looking west.
We have a project that.
Yep.
Gotcha.
Right here.
Yeah, I was looking for where that town center boulevard was. Okay.
Yeah, and Aaron had just mentioned too, is there are a couple new workforce housing projects in the pipeline. Actually, one's currently being built on 175. That might even be close to wrapping up. And then another one is being proposed here at the corner of Hale Street and Town Center Boulevard. So again, really trying to connect the dots here between workforce housing, connectivity, and sort of creating this sense of place for folks.
How big are these, those are brand new apartments right here, right, with this grassy kind of roof on the
Well,
top?
so this is just a concept plan
Right,
of what
okay.
could be built.
Okay.
Yeah, this is like, think of your vision statement, but rendered.
Mhm.
Like if you
Sure.
put it into Chat GPT.
And then again those are some of the capital projects and other partner projects that are supporting the Odenton Town Center. But there are also other financial programs that help development within the town center. There's the commercial revitalization area, sustainable communities. And again, these all provide additional funding and resources available to individuals to get projects going, as well as I'm joined by Kaylee De La Fuente from Anne Arundel Economic Development Corporation. And they work hand in hand with providing financial incentives and programs for projects to get set up in the Odenton Town Center as well. And you can see some of those listed here. Anything else you want to add about AADC's work?
Well, I'll just tell you a little bit more about my kind of role in the county here. I'm the Town Center Revitalization Manager. One of our town centers is Arundel Town Center, which is why I'm here tonight. The other two are Glen Burnie and Parole. So those, I'm meant to be somewhat of securing funding for and an implementation hand for some of the revitalization planning, work that has been undertaken in the county over the past couple of years. So one of those projects, that we recently secured funding for, a lot of our revitalization funding, comes from Maryland Department of Housing and Community Development. They're probably one of our closest partners and friends in securing funds for that. And Project Restore, allows us to provide grant funding to businesses to move into vacant commercial properties. One of them will be in Odenton Town Center at the Villages at Odenton Station. And the other is our ACR revitalization, Arundel Community Reinvestment Program, which is a facade improvement loan for commercial properties.
Who's your target for that? Is that like Boomtown that you're looking at
For the ACR program?
for the facade improvement?
That's the 11 revitalization areas in the county in terms of what we're looking at tonight in Odenton. That would be left by Fort Meade. That's one, is that one?
Yeah.
That's what they
Yeah.
call Boomtown, right? That used to be, where all
Across
the
from
tattoo
Fort
places
Yeah.
and everything, yeah.
Yeah, that's the revitalization area in this. There's 11 throughout the county.
Okay,
But for
yeah.
these purposes,
And
yeah.
that's where they're building a new hotel or some building.
That's one of the workforce housing projects. If the ones that's currently under construction, yeah, it's 150 units, I believe.
It's come a long way in the last 10 years.
Yeah.
Area.
So again, just sort of driving home the fact that the Odenton Town Center could be one of these areas to absorb some of that potential growth. And there are the county programs and partner projects that help support that and encourage and facilitate that as well. Okay, any questions before moving on to breakout discussion? Y'all have enough information maybe to chat about this a little bit more. So some of the sort of prompts that we can talk about here are, again, what are some of the housing issues in your community? Talking with any of your neighbors, is it affordable in your sense? Do you want it, or is there the possibility of seeing different types of housing styles? Does missing middle make sense? And looking through some of the financial recommendations, and we can touch on general areas in Region 5 where housing should go. We'll get into that a lot more deeper when we do roll out the zoning maps and the planned land use map and the development policy area map. But again, start thinking about where additional housing could make sense, or where you don't want additional housing. So again, is down here at the bottom, I do have that asterisk because while we don't necessarily have any additional housing strategies, because the zoning map is intended to actually implement these housing strategies that we're talking about by identifying where growth should be occurring and not. Okay, so any last questions? What we're gonna do is then break up into two groups, just very evenly. It doesn't need to be based on where you live or geography or anything like that. We'll just break up. And we've got a couple flip charts. We'll ask one individual to take notes and another individual then, when we do wrap up, to share out their ideas to the bigger group when we do reconvene. Okay? Any last thoughts before we break? Okay. And share out some of the ideas that you all had talked about, or some of the issues that may need addressing as translated into strategies for the plan. So Sam, you wanna go with your note?
I'm just Vanna.
He's a great man. We spent the beginning part of our discussion talking about ADUs. Basically, the fees associated with the ADUs seem to be cost prohibitive. Additionally, there needs to be some flexibility in the code on where to put them, how to place them, how to get them approved. We did There's something about the health department being a challenge as well. And the bill that came out, passed, and maybe we should make a recommendation to retool that based on applications that have been filed, maybe a lessons learned on what's held some of them back and making some adjustments to the bill. Overall, a lot of the community feedback was that existing communities are pretty much built out and mature, making it difficult to replace that housing. Really only the instance would be if that housing, an existing home were to be demolished or would be burned down and rebuilt or something like that. Certainly, too many townhomes was consistent feedback. And really a recommendation for more flexibility in housing types. We did spend some time talking about fees and costs, specifically front foot benefits and how that impacts the overall housing cost. Although that's more of a private fee that may not be under our control. We talked about tiering costs. For example, connection fees for a large home is the same cost as for a smaller home. So that helps, potentially helps make housing a bit more affordable. Very supportive of first-time buyer resources and maybe find some tools to expand it beyond the first-time home buyer so that they can move out of that smaller house as their family grows. Future growth directed towards the Arundel Town Center where infrastructure is currently in place. Agricultural zoning in this area generally constrains future growth, but there is some stretches of 450 that might be considered when we roll out zoning maps. Maybe there's some opportunity there. Provide incentive for redevelopment. There's older commercial buildings that probably could have a higher and best use. So when we're looking at zoning, maybe look at a zoning designation that would allow both commercial and residential so that the property has more flexibility if and when it needs to be replaced. Let's see. A big concern is really just establishing that sense of place, which is very difficult to do when we have smaller infill sites. It's hard to have that sort of heart of a community, but that's something that really needs to be focused on as infill development occurs. And last but not least, two more things, amenities. We're really talking about, specifically, we talked about amenity like a recreational center for the community. So as the communities grow, it's good to have resources that are publicly available to others. And last, really, the affordability component remains a big question mark. We don't really know how to solve that since there's so many exterior market factors on that, but you know, that's something that should be focused on going forward.
Wow.
Thanks.
Just do the next step.
Okay, so I'm gonna try to touch on the things that, we did not overlap on, which is like, we overlapped on a lot, so that's good. We were talking about, age in place, location, or just housing in general. A lot of, I should say millennials, one being myself, we're talking about parents and, you know, senior housing. Do they come live with us? Can our house be adapted so they can live with us? Is it, do we have a single family home? Do we have a location on the first floor, for that to happen? So that's what age in place is noting, as well as multi-generational. We were just talking about rezoning and the whole process of RA and, the various R designations and how, we'll get into this more about how we can pivot between things, to help folks who might have an RA, residential or agriculture, right?
Residential agriculture.
Yeah, and if they want to subdivide that, is there a way to make that easier for some folks versus others? Probably put in a application to change it. And then, rental subsidies. So, work within the parameters established with the, federal, DOD, base housing subsidy that's provided, or allowance, I should say, that's provided to military members, since Fort Meade is a main employing source for the state in this area. And then financial incentives for the missing middle, so avoiding the townhouses that it sounded like other folks also do not care for. The cottage style with the courts, are also preferred by our group. And then think about, plan ahead of development in terms of infrastructure. So the things that are gray, I liked your analogy there. So like the pipes in the ground, the roads, the schools, the hospitals, plan for those ahead. So that is, before we are building a ton of units that we're gonna have even more people here with things that are, with an infrastructure system are already stressed. I think that's it. Is anybody else in my group? Did I catch everything that wasn't a double? Okay.
Okay. Great, so this is, again, what we'll do with this is, where there is an opportunity to, integrate, some of these issues or ideas into strategies and work them into the plan, we'll do that. Otherwise, most of these other items are things that we can talk about when we roll out the maps. I think Jim had mentioned it, is potential areas where we want to upzone or keep the same zoning or downzone. We'll get to that conversation in a few months. So with that, I'm gonna hand it over to Christina to open it up for public comment. I don't think we have anybody here in the crowd. And then just online, we just do have one individual. Not sure if they wanna say anything.
Yeah.
So just give them another minute.
They'll raise their hand, right, if they have any.
Sam will let us know.
Okay.
Anything? No movement?
Nothing, okay,
Okay.
so we will assume there's no public comment.
Yep.
Okay,
All right, so,
go ahead.
so as always, next steps, so our next meeting is February 13th, we'll be meeting here again, and that's the joint meeting for Region 6, where we will be discussing transportation, economic development, and specifically the MD Route 3 corridor. After that, March 19th, we'll be back at the senior center, at the top of the senior center, we'll be talking about schools, health and aging disabilities, and other public facilities and services. We had April, May TBD, those are those dates we discussed previously about, those zoning map exercises. So stay tuned, we'll probably see some surveys soon about those meetings. And then we wanted to note this for you guys, up and coming MDOT it will be hosting a public meeting on the MD3 corridor. Again, TBD, we're waiting for information to be published so we can distribute that to you guys if you guys want to attend or have any additional information on that topic.
What is that about?
So MDOT is starting their own study on the Maryland Route 3 corridor. This will be their first public meeting where it will be general outreach and fact findings. Mark, do you know more about the MDOT meeting coming up?
I don't. If you Google MDOT project portal, it brings up an interactive website and you can, you'll see a flashing blue dot along the MD3 corridor. Click on that and you'll be able to get some more information about their study. Their latest update was back in September, where they talked about setting up a meeting. So once we get that information from MDOT, we'll pass it along to you all. They'll probably help supplement some of our discussion at the February meeting.
So you think that's coming up soon?
I might anticipate in mid-February, mid to late February. Yeah.
So previously at the state highway office, they had various, alternatives for Route 3 and the interchanges and the status of the, what they would do if they redeveloped Route 3. Are any of those still available? Are they restarting the process? Or any of their older alternatives still in play?
That's something we'll hear about at the February meeting, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Finally, we have all our speaker information, their websites as well as who they are and who they work for. And as always, our email at the bottom, for any comments, questions, concerns. Before we let you guys go, we do have a new face. This is Matt Ross, recently hired to the Office of Planning and Zoning, to work with us in the Region 5 team. So Matt, you want to say?
Yeah, hi, I started last week, so I'm looking forward to getting into things. Yeah, I worked as a consultant at a planning firm up in northern Baltimore County for about 2 years. Before that, I was a public librarian for 12. I really enjoy working with the public, so here I am.
Welcome.
Thank you.
And
That's all, yeah.
okay, I did want to remind folks that, if you ever need a cheat sheet, I threw this in my email too. If you ever need a cheat sheet that's super reliable, for upcoming meetings or previous agendas, meeting minutes, anything of that nature, go to the Region 5 website. You can just Google Region 5 Anne Arundel County and it goes, at least on my Google algorithm, it goes right to the top. So, you don't even have to remember the website, so that's a really good reference, especially since we've got a couple of shifts in meeting times, between this meeting and the next one. And then with that, I'd like to make, or sorry, I can't make a motion. Do we have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
I'll make a motion and adjourn the meeting.
Okay, do we have a second? Okay, got a second? And, we will need to move that to a vote. All in favor? Okay, any opposed? Okay. This meeting has been adjourned at 7:45 PM.